Our next challenge couldn't be better graphic than a tug of war. And I wish we had a real rope here because the pandemic certainly taught us to go virtual and to do video conferencing. And the challenge now to all of you is that you need to be, again, hybrid. The hybrid event challenge in multiple places, in multiple audience, on multiple devices, at multiple times for less cost. And Laura Frank, who has worked venues, large, small, theatrical, spectacular, is going to moderate our next and last panel, and I can't wait for you to meet them. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the panel that stands between you and happy hour, so we'll get to the point. I'm going to invite my panelists on while I just describe what we're going to be talking about. I had not seen the tug of war analogy, which I think is so great because I think the group of us represent a lot of different technologies that get mixed into this bucket that we now loosely refer to as hybrid. But I think we've all been working in a space that has been hybrid for a long time before we started using that term. So as we get started with this panel, what I'd like to do is have everyone introduce themselves, talk about the event space they're in that relates to this hybrid topic, and then tell us which they value more, the audience in the room or the audience that's remote. Matt, we'll start with you.
My name is Matt Cesca. I'm a part of the Salesforce strategic events team, specifically sitting in the broadcast sector. I've been there for 5 years now, and for the past 5 years, I've been the technical lead for all of our Dreamforces. That's generally the conference most people know when they think about Salesforce. And as I said, it's kind of in the name, right? So me, the number one audience is digital, but we have to work close with all of our different partners. We're pulling feeds from the keynote, theaters, and breakouts. So it's all an experience, but for me, priority is the digital front.
Great. Justin, how about you?
I'm Justin Cowgill. I'm the Director of Technical Services for the San Jose Sharks. And so I do a lot more with our center hung displays around the building, but we also interface our broadcasts. We also do a few streams and connect all those different spaces and hybrid between those. And in a former career, I also did a lot of hybrid events with government meetings.
And Cami, wrapping it up.
Yeah, Camila Louise, I'm part of Google. I'm a creative strategist. Part of my job, aside from the creative space and AI content creation, is events production, hybrid events production, in person, virtual, all of sorts of events. More, of course, on the corporate side. For me, even though we all love virtuality and we are thankful for the technology, there's something that it's magical when we have in-person events. So for me, always in person, it's just, I don't know, a blast to have with people.
Nice perspective. In my background, prior to working at Megapixel as the creator advocate, I did a lot of special event, multi-camera broadcast events like award shows and music variety shows. And I grew up in that industry understanding the live audience to basically be scenery. So I think, there's a nice approach to make sure we deliver something amazing for the live audience as well as for the audience at home. And with that, I think we can spend a little time talking about the term itself, hybrid, and understanding that we really started using this term in around 2020 when it meant we needed to keep our live audience at home and deliver something that was exciting for them and try and recreate some of that live experience as much as we can. So the audiences did come back, but the word stayed and the practice evolved. So what does hybrid actually mean in your particular operation today? And is it even the same thing you meant when you started using the term? How has it changed over these last 6 years? Cami, we'll start with you.
Yeah. For Google, it's very important about the momentum, right? It's very important that every time that we put an event together, people feel inspired, engaged, and we want to make sure that whoever is at home or in the office or wherever you are, you feel part of that connection. So for us right now, after a few years after pandemic, I think hybrid means how we can get that pure connection and which are the strategies that we use, not only in the technology side, but also in the cultural side, which are the strategies that we put together to make sure that if you're at home, you're also feeling part of that. And I think when we started to do this at the pandemic, the goal was just deliver the message, right? Like we just wanted people to understand what we needed to say and just deliver the message with the resources that we have at the time. Right now, we put a lot of attention to details to make sure that we can create that experience. Of course, it's never going to be the same, but as much as if you were in the office.
Justin,
So in the government sector, I saw a lot of those hybrid events want to ramp up with a lot more, hey, we're going to have in-person, but a lot of remote people coming in. But then we started to see that trickle off and the desire to get away from that, but still deliver kind of more of a broadcast instead of a two-way conversation, which is where I think that hybrid conversation originally started with, oh, we can have a conversation like when there's people in the audience. But I've seen that dwindle off. And then I think from a sports and entertainment side, what we've really seen from that is it's not just the couple of screens we're used to in, say, 16:9 or a couple different resolutions. It's now 9:16 or hitting things in post and getting those long-term effects of what things are to engage people continuously.
how about for you?
Yeah, when I first joined Salesforce, we were kind of coming out of the pandemic, and the focus was, at the time, Salesforce was great at the on-site, was learning the digital front, and it's a little bit cheesy to talk about it now, but the way we kind of think of it is less so hybrid and just one team, one dream, right? So we're all producing the same event, and like kind of Justin was saying, they tie in on so many different screens, and they tie in both on-site and digitally because maybe somebody can't make it on site or they're learning and they don't want to make the investment of a ticket to say a Dreamforce, but they do want to log on and watch the Dreamforce broadcast. So as we're bringing that to them, one, we're delivering content, but at the same time, hopefully it can attract them to then come in the future and come be on site. And so that's where it's really that one team, one dream that I mentioned, because we're all working together to bring our messaging, our marketing to the audience.
And I think you bring up a really good point because maybe the hybrid term itself will go away. We've started merging the infrastructure of traditional broadcast and the IT, as we've discussed many times today. But you bring up a really good point. I think the result of that hybrid experience is a lot of this content. And we were going to talk about video on demand services as well. And I think that ties in nicely because while even today we are capturing this content, it is a hybrid event. What's going to matter is we can review this later. It reaches a larger audience after it's been live. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you support that?
Yeah, 100%. The on-demand motion for us is huge, right? Dreamforce, and really any of our events, but Dreamforce I'll speak to, is 3 days long. And, hundreds of different keynotes, breakouts, theaters. We also have broadcast desks and studios where we create segments out as well. So we net out overall about just under 400 on-demand segments total that we put together. And the event happens across those 3 days, but the selling, the advertising, the messaging, it doesn't just stop right there. It continues on, right? So all of that on-demand content we create, it goes into our sellers' hands, it goes into our clients' hand, it goes into our customers' hand, and they're able to learn about a project, demo about a project that or a product they're looking to bring on. So it's really just powerful for the post-event motion so much.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the creative and technical challenges in our hybrid workflows. The cameras in our venues typically have two jobs for these events. The iMag is designed to bring the live audience closer, as well as deliver a broadcast feed for the home experience. The screens in these environments have two jobs as well. In the room, they typically are scenic surfaces, running sometimes very unusual aspect ratios for those camera signals. And at home, everything has to then collapse into that 16:9 frame with broadcast graphics on top. So where do those demands on your infrastructure, your scenic infrastructure, your camera infrastructure collide when building out these productions? Justin, why don't you talk about from the point of view of the sports venue?
I think where we find that is it's actually been in the nature of sports for a very long time, since we've had screens in the buildings, we share those cameras with the trucks, right? And then similarly, we share our cameras back with the trucks. It really comes back down to routing and basic signal flow, but the key to it all is communication. So who's controlling which operator, what the expectations of those are, and how you handle that really becomes the key to how you figure out what that resource is really designed for. So in the case of sports, we tend to just go overkill with too many cameras in a few spots, but that allows for, say, the home and the visiting teams to both have the shots that they need, but they'll share the same game follow camera, right? So they have their each of their own specific cameras. But then from a board show perspective, we're taking all of those feeds plus our own to figure out how to map those. So it really does take communicating what your needs are and making sure your producers, directors across all platforms are communicating with one another in advance so that when you're in production, you're not trying to figure out who has control.
And it's not like you're storyboarding that out. It's just something that I think is learned through practice and iteration in that sports environment, how your in-house boards control team differentiates from your broadcast team and how they communicate. Cami, you have some thoughts?
Yeah, similar to what Matt was saying, we have our biggest events, Google I/O, Google Marketing Live, Made on Google. We have a bunch of like these events through the year. But plus one, to Justin's point, we need to talk to each other. We have meetings months ahead. We want to make sure that we are thinking about the content end to end, not only the day of the event, but what we are producing for social media, how we are advertising the events. And then at the moment where we have people on stage, we want to make sure that everyone is aware of what we are looking for, which is the message that we want to produce, which are the different bytes that we are going to use for post-production, for social media after that, right? And that needs a lot of conversations from different teams, marketing, production, technical people, of course, even the venue. Like we have a lot of conversations. I think one critical moment is when you are live and things don't go the way that you talked about in those meetings. And for me, that moment as a producer and being behind the scene, that is the critical part, right? When we want to make sure that we learn and we move on, we solve at the moment, and then we learn from next time. No one is pointing to each other. No one is like blaming anyone at the moment, and we just learn and move on. And for me, that's the most important part when I'm in an event, to make sure that I can wear my firefighter hat and make sure that things sometimes they don't go the way that we plan for 5 months and then things happen. And that's fine, right? Like we cannot control 100% of things all the time. And that's a big learning for me, my team, how to move on when we are live on stage.
And I think for you, Matt, we were discussing, especially with these massive screen configurations for some of these live events, managing the amount of informational content versus camera content versus scenic content that is on those displays, and what the at-home audience can really capture out of that. When they need the same information, they need different cameras. Do you want to talk about some of your productions?
Yeah, for sure. That's certainly where we see some of the most challenges on our front is in the keynote room. Specifically, like we don't have as many cameras as what Justin works with at the SAP Center. So a lot of what goes to our iMac also goes to our digital audience. Now we do have some other cameras for like wide shots and beauties that we bring in, but for the most part, it's one-to-one. Where we see the biggest challenges are what you mentioned, our screens. A lot of times our screens are designed not in a 16:9 format, 3-to-1. We've done some other crazy ratios as well. And specifically, our challenge comes on the graphic front of the slides. So those slides, once they go into that 3-to-1 format, you can't take that into a broadcast very easily. So we've tried a few different routes at it. More recently, we do, while the deck will be designed in 3-to-1, our creative team puts most of the content in the middle, and then we'll go ahead and take a center cut in that 16:9 format so we could bring in for our picture-in-picture. We've also done some fun creative things in the past where we actually had a completely separate broadcast deck. It had to be designed in Keynote because that's what all of our creatives work in. You know, they're not going to deliver us After Effects or anything like that, even though we've tried a lot on that front. But so we had them create a separate deck within Keynote, but we were creative with how it was designed, and we were able to pull a key and fill out of that keynote deck. So we were able to do a lot of cool things like, lower thirds or more broadcast friendly graphics that you would see watching, a television program or sports or whatnot. But the screens 100% have been our biggest challenge with the hybrid and blending it all together.
I've been in situations where, in a broadcast truck, and you take that wide shot and it's the wrong camera and the IMAG screens that are being captured. That's where I saw the most conflict. But I think people can be pretty forgiving about that because most of their focus is on talent in that moment. So we want it to look as good as possible. But as Cami pointed out, we, make mistakes. Sometimes you flub something, you get it right next time. Let's dig deeper into the technical reality of putting all these together, especially serving the room and the feed, as we're describing, have different technical priorities. And we want to understand where that system has strained for you in the past. So, Justin, we had talked a little bit as audio as the thing that gets missed most. The in-venue mix and at-home mix can be very different animals.
So what's the most important part about video? Audio, right? And until we had sound with film, people didn't go to cinema. So it is true that people want to hear what's coming for them. What this sounds like in here would sound terrible at home, right? There'd be no gnats. There'd be nothing to give it life. But then again, if you gave a bunch of gnat sounds into this mix, it would sound horrible in the venue. So it's really a matter of how do you really plan for those audio cues, divide up the audio, and give the right control to people. And if you're thinking that the broadcast is the most important thing, I'll tell you from a venue perspective, the only person who should ever have the gain control is the guy up there in the sound booth in the venue. Because that's where it all starts, because that's what's going to prevent the feedback. There's so many other things you can do in broadcast to boost that. But it's back to that coordination. It's back to making sure people understand their roles and their capabilities of what those mixes are. I can give you an example. The recent NHL draft, we were doing a live hit with our general manager, and all of our audio was great, but the talent back in Buffalo did not hear our GM on their interview call. And it's because there was so many channels of audio that the poor audio engineer in the truck back in Buffalo was having to route between. There's 32 teams that they could possibly be talking to. And he had to make sure he had the right IFB. He didn't, or the right signal from that. So there's a lot that can go into that. So pre-planning that, having the right people to support that, right? Obviously, an A1 can only do so much, but if your A2 doesn't know how to support your A1, and then it gets tricky in a truck because there's only so much space. So really thinking through those capabilities can also help you hone what do you want your end piece to be. So maybe you scale back on some of those things so that you actually control it and make it sound as good as it should.
And Matt, we talked about your MCR being in Amsterdam, so I think you could talk about latency as one of those challenges that you face.
Yeah, 100%. So as you mentioned, our MCR is in Amsterdam. And I mentioned all those spaces before that we pull the feeds from. So at Dreamforce this past year, we had 5 keynote rooms. We had a broadcast stage. We had a broadcast studio. We had 12 different theaters and breakouts, all that we're pulling the ultimate feeds from. Now, some of those rooms, like keynotes and those breakouts and theaters, we're dropping fly packs in. So we're getting a full program signal coming out of our on-site location that gets sent back to Amsterdam. But things like our broadcast stage and our studios, we're mixing those completely within the Amsterdam MCR. Now, our broadcast stage is actually generally on-site in the middle of our campground, and we have a lot of great speakers come to it. Sometimes we have luminaries, sometimes our higher up execs go there. So we have audience seating, and we want to cater to that and make it an experience for them on site. But when we're sending all of those signals back and forth, and everything goes over SRT, so the latency we're looking at, generally getting it back round trip is 1 second to 2 seconds. Now, as an audience member, and you're listening to open air, maybe it doesn't bother you too much with when I say something, it doesn't match up exactly perfect, but there's cameras in the way. It is a broadcast studio, so it isn't the hardest thing to tell. But where we find the biggest challenge of that is actually a lot of our speakers. Now, I mentioned we have luminaries, we have some high-up execs. they're usually pretty well media trained. But we also get a bunch of people at our desk that are new speakers or not very well media trained. And if they hear themselves back in those environments, it completely throws them off. They could lose their train of thought. Their segment goes out the window. So we've had to get a little bit creative in that way. Typically, it's been just switching to silent disco, but that is definitely one of the things that we see in terms of latency problems with our signal going to Amsterdam and coming back for something like our broadcast stage.
Cami, what's an engineering challenge you're facing right now?
I was going to say that my most challenging technical challenge is people. To Matt's point, yeah, in corporate you have a lot of speakers that are their first-time speakers. You have to media train them. If you're doing a hybrid event, how to make sure that the speaker is talking to people in the room, but also to people at home or wherever they are. As a creative strategist and former communications partner, my role is also try to build them for success on those moments. And I leave the IT people and the technical people to do their work. My most challenging part is to prepare the speakers to make sure that they realize that there's also people on the other side on the screen and they need to be ready to involve those audiences, even though they're not facing them. Yeah.
Have you come up with any special tricks to make that your talent comfortable in those situations?
Yeah, we have a lot of media training and practices. Of course, we have our mock situations where we train them, where we ask uncomfortable questions for them to deal with. a lot of communication partners tricks.
Excellent. So let's move on and do some future-facing talk. I think one of the things that I see hybrid starting to mean relates to personalization. We have all these camera signals. We can deliver them anywhere. Why not let that at-home audience have more control over which signals they get to see or how many of them they get to see at once? So would you discuss anything your events are doing looking future forward about personalization and how we're optimizing that experience for the audience at home?
Yeah, for us, we decided that for every big corporate event for internal audiences, we are going to do it twice. To have one in EMEA, America's time zone, and one in APAC, EMEA time zone. For that objective that I mentioned at the beginning, that we want to make sure that everyone feels that they are belonging to the event and they are part of the event, we realized that it doesn't make sense to be a global team and have only one event. And for the personalization for both of them, if we are doing any examples or we are using any success stories for our customers, if we are doing like any specific localization, we will change that script from one meeting to the other. So not in the technical part, because we're mostly using our resources in the office and our cameras in the office and everything, but for the content itself, we want to make sure that wherever we are saying, it also meets the audience expectations and criteria.
Yeah, our goal on this topic is really to try and meet the audience where they're at. I think Camila brought up a great point, right? We're tailoring our broadcasts to exactly where those audiences are. So like we do the global, we'll do 24 hours at Dreamforce, where we'll do completely global replays, where the content's totally tailored to those different markets. Further than that, we have our proprietary platform, Salesforce Plus, where we do all of our broadcast streaming from. But on top of that, we're trying to take as many keynotes and those breakouts in theaters and stream those out on social. So whether that's LinkedIn, YouTube, X, Facebook, again, we want to meet audiences where they're at. And then furthermore on that, I mentioned the 24-hour broadcast really becomes about 60 when we talk about across the 3 days. But we don't expect somebody to come and watch all 60 hours of our broadcast, right? Even watching a full 8-hour day of broadcast is pretty ridiculous from our front. We at Salesforce have a ton of different industries that we work with. So the way we like to design our broadcast is within industry blocks, right? So maybe from the first hour and a half, it's tied to financial services. So that way all of our marketing teams are able to point, hey, financial services, tune into this block. This is for you. It goes to the on-demand after that. But we really work to personalize when we want you to come versus like, hey, just check this out from a broad spectrum.
And we take and have a lot of different media groups and media types, and we actually are trying to figure out how to better share our resources amongst each other so that those have a better distribution across sharing that fan experience and sharing that, telling that story in a way that is meaningful to each fan. So many different ways to show what is happening on the ice, but from different angles.
And the ice hockey's great because that was the first kind of augmented sports interface, right? With there was a puck tool that was an augmented reality layer on the camera signal. Is any of that exposed on the venue boards?
So within our building, we have what we call the data tracking of the players and everything, and we are able to grab that and have a display that we show, and we're hoping to elaborate in the places it is, but we have a dedicated channel that you can tune to in your suite or some of the various places in the building and see who's on the ice, how fast the puck's traveling, how much time that player's been on ice, and so it's incredible amount of stats that's flowing through everything.
That's awesome. So we have a few minutes. Let's send this room to happy hour with one takeaway. What's the skill you're retraining your crews for right now or hiring for that didn't exist a few years ago?
I guess I can start with this. For us, it's really just kind of a jack of all trades. We need people to come in and be able to run a lot of things. When we were during the pandemic, we were doing broadcasts from our house. And like me personally, I was a one-man crew. I was running the video, I was running the audio, I was putting the graphics, playing the videos back, switching the cameras, right? Now that's not feasible when we talk about the broadcast that we were talking about. But as budgets get more and more constrained in our field, being able to do maybe a broadcast that was 10 people before, if even we get it to 8 people, 7 people, it's so much better. So just being a jack of all trades versus specializing is really helpful. And then the other piece, it's a little cliche, and you hear it all the time, but it's AI, right? And learning about AI. We had a presentation not too long ago where a speaker wanted a really specific countdown clock for them. They wanted it to go when it was at the 30-minute mark to be every minute, so not like 30 minutes and then you see the seconds counting down. They wanted to go 30, 29, et cetera, but then once it hit 1, they wanted it to then go to the seconds, and then it gets better. On top of that, once it hit 0, they wanted to say time's up, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know many countdown clocks that you just find that will do that. But we did have an engineer on our team who was pretty well versed in Claude code. He went in there, he was able to write something up, and then we were able to use it. So some things like that are huge for being able to tailor the experience for situations like that.
Yeah, related to that, I think adaptability, problem solving, thinking out of the box, for me, it's critical because, as I mentioned, when we are live, we need people to get the hands-on and solve things, right? And I really don't care what's your title or which university you went. I want to see you on the field. And right now I feel, to Matt's point, we used to be so specialist and each of us to be in different departments. And right now the challenge is to be a little bit of everything, that I need people to be willing to learn, to be problem solving, to be open to bring new skills to the table. Everything else can be learned, but the mindset cannot be learned, right? So I pay more attention to the mindset than the skill itself.
And I think this is going to be resounding. All three of us want the same thing. During the pandemic, the Bay Area lost a lot of people with a lot of skill. They retired, they went away. There's not a big resource of production crew in the Bay Area like people think. And it is really one big crew. The crews that work my games, work Giants games, work Cal, Berkeley, or Cal, Stanford, Chase, right? Niners. So we all work in the same thing. So they need to be universal. They need to be adaptable. And we do allow for it. We want people who are open to trying new things, because the guy who thought was just audio might really be a great replay operator, or might be the guy that only wants to stick to camera. Try the control room. Your body will thank you later. There's a lot of things around that. that if you push yourself as a person in this industry, you can be used in a lot of different ways. And it also means that you make more crews because you're more adaptable.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate everyone's time. Thanks for joining us for this last session.
Thank you.
And thank you, panel.